Welcome back to my channel, and today we will be making Plague Drones of Nurgle. Now, first thing I'm going to start off with this nice kit is I'm going to drill a hole in the very center for the base mounting. So first I'm going to drill through with a Dremel drill bit, then I'm going to stick a, a hand tool through, a hand sander, or hand file, through the center, make sure it's the right diameter, and then smooth it off with a razor blade, and then test to see if it fits. We get the pieces off the sprue, and then we clean off the mold lines with a razor blade. Using super glue, I then begin to assemble the model and all its legs and other appendages. Once the model is fully assembled, I then notice that there is a huge gap in the plastic. We're going to fix that with putty, but we're going to save that puttying step for a little bit later. First we have to take care of, we have a basing issue. The plastic bases go straight through the holes provided. It is terrible. Our solution to this problem is green putty. Using equal parts yellow and blue, we start to mold them together. Now, there's going to be a huge mass of green putty, but there's going to be a little bit left over. For this, I'm going to save for making maggots for the plague bears. So I roll a bunch into a thin wire. You want to take like a credit card or some thin plastic and rub it between the two to get a uniform thin wire. Now, I'm not going to use all of it, but I'm going to use some of it for now. I'll save the rest for another project. We fill the hole with the green putty, make sure everything can fit inside there, then we take some water and a rubber brush and we smooth it out. Then using some Liquitex modeling putty, we'll then use this to cover the entirety of all the bases. Even the hole, well, don't worry, we can drill it out later. Now once again with the Liquitex modeling putty and some model glue, we mix the two together to create a interesting paste that melts and adheres to plastic. Now what we're going to do is first we're going to use this to try to fill those massive gaps on the Plague Drone models. Now this works pretty well, but you can still somewhat see it on the finished product later. And then we will take this putty and we'll also apply it to the plague bears, and then we'll do a stippling effect all over their body as well. And then we will also do this on the plague drone abdomens as well. We'll put paste all over it and then we'll stipple it to create a diseased flesh texture. Now for the green putty maggots, what we're going to do is we're going to take the strings we make and we're going to cut them into tiny little pieces. Now line up Plague Bear right next to it to get an approximate size of how big these things should be. They should be noticeable but still very tiny. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take super glue and we're going to place it on next to a spot where we think a maggot should be, normally next to where an open sore is. Then we will take the razor knife and we will press it in there, and we will push and press and flatten it a little bit with the razor knife and make sure it conforms to the body. I then prep the models for priming. Now, I didn't really know what I was doing here, so I just assembled the models entirely with the spare plastic rods that the box set gave me. It gives you two sets, a short set and a long set. I use the short set just as a placeholder for spray priming, and I use my Bright Touch gray spray car primer. However, it didn't really work out. These models are really kind of a nightmare to paint. It's really hard to spray all over around them. There's a lot of nook and crannies on these. So, yeah, it was kind of a wasted effort, as well as it kept the putty very soft for several days afterwards instead of hours. Now, after another coat of spray priming, getting the bottom part down, we can now look and see it's all well done, and looking at the gaps in the plastic, the putty did fill it out very well, but there's still a few areas where it could use a little bit more, but too late for that. Moving on. Now, using an off-white pallid witch flesh, we're going to use this with the airbrush, and we're going to spray from a 45-degree or higher angle and get to the raised areas on the model. We're not going to do a dark undercoat from the underside for this model, so we're going to stick with this off-white first. Then using white scar, a pure white, we're then going to dry brush on the model all over it, straight up and down. We want to get those highlights in. Now we're going to mostly focus heavily on the wings because there needs to be a lot of highlight on it, on all the areas of the wings, because it has many complicated parts. Now I'm going to try adding some shade by using some nolan oil to add some depth to this wing. I then go back and dry brush white scar white over the wing again in order to pick out the highlights again further. We're now going to take contrast skeleton horde and dilute it with technical contrast medium. And what we're going to do is try to build layers. We're going to have the edges of the wing be as light as possible, and then the closer it gets towards the body, it gets darker. I'm going to build several layers for about 3 or 4. Now we're going to take some Liquitex glazing medium and some Mournfang brown. And we're going to mix these two together to create sort of a light wash, or a diluted wash. Now we're going to mix some water in to make sure it flows right. And just keep adding water till it flows as well as you like. Then we're going to apply it towards the edges of the wing, or the closest to the body. And we want it darker up there, and we're going to spread it out a little bit. Now, it's going to be too hard of a transition, so we're going to wipe off the excess on a paper towel, water the brush a bit, and we're going to help blend it in so that the transition is not too harsh on the color. I want some more color in, so I'm going to take some Mephiston red and I'm going to mix it in with the Mournfang brown wash that we've created. Just a little bit of color, we just want a slight coloration, and then we're going to add it to the very top, closest to the body. And now it creates a very nice effect on the wing. I really like the color transition. This is golden. Once again, using some diluted Skeleton Horde contrast paint, I then paint it all over the wing in order to tie all the colors together. Now we're going to use some Agrax Earthshade and we're going to dilute it heavily with water. We just want a thin layer of this. We're going to apply it all over the drone's abdomen, body, and legs. Not the chittin, or armor. Now back to the glazing medium. With Zamasi Desert, we're going to create a very thin and diluted wash right here. We're going to add water in to make sure it's very smooth, and what we want is a very clear, transparent wash. And what we're basically going to do is going to coat all the skin that we just painted with Agrax Earthshade, and what this is going to do is basically it's going to add a yellowish tint to it. So we got a kind of a sickened white kind of skin on it. And returning to Mournfang Brown, we notice that we are empty of it. And the plague is not going to allow us to refill. However, by chance, I happened to pick up some Mournfang Brown before all the chaos outside went down, so we're still good. With Liquitex Glazing Medium and Mournfang Brown again, diluted with water, we're going to use this and we're going to apply this onto the claws. Now we're going to dilute it enough with water so that it is see-through. We want to be able to see the white underneath, so to add more depth and color to this. Mixing a very small speck of Mephiston Red into the Mournfang Brown wash we've created, and then use this to darken the edges of the chittin blades. Now using nolan oil, we'll go all over the chittin, or armor, or whatever this is called. I don't know what this anatomy is, I got no idea. Now back to these three paints again, we're going to mix them together and we want to try to create a reddish-brown wash or paint, and we're going to apply this all over the armor. But in this, I don't exactly get the amount right. I guess I added too much water in it and make it a little too diluted, so I had to keep adding more and more red and then more and more brown, and then I just got a ton of paint that in the end I didn't really use, but I was able to achieve the color. I just messed up. I then apply a second coat of this wash. I then proceed to mix more Mournfang Brown into the wash to give it a darker brown, and then I use this to paint the open areas of the chittin armor place to try to create smoother there, because it looks like it has like air bubbles or stuff throughout that wide armor. So I use this to try to smooth it out. It's so results. Looking back now, it actually looks pretty good, but the current me who is painting it did not like it, so I went back and added a bunch of Nolan oil wash over it to add some more depth, and it really didn't look any better. Using the brown part of that same wash, we're going to take it and we're going to apply it into these open holes on the abdomen of the body. We're going to use contrast paint Magos Purple, and we're going to apply this to around the infected area on the abdomen where the brown paint is. We're going to use this to add like a bruising or transition on it. Now we're going to paint all the boils Bestigor flesh all throughout the body. Moving on to Fugan Orange Wash, we're going to use this and apply this directly onto all the boils we just painted. We want to completely surround the boil with this reddish wash. Now with some very thinned down Abaddon Black, we're going to use this as a wash and I'm going to put it directly onto the eyes of the monster. And it looks pretty good. Now using Baylor Brown, we're going to use this paint to paint all the teeth on the creature. I use Skeleton Contrast Horde on the teeth to create depth and shading, and I'll use a second coat later towards the gums to create more darkness and depth there. Using Baylor Brown, we apply this all over the base. Using Natural Umber from Vallejo Pigments, we mix it with water and then we'll spread it all over to create some depth and like dirt everywhere. Using a dark brown fake moss from Ashland, we'll then apply superglue onto spots where the paint shines through, or just places that just look bad. We'll apply superglue there and then we will roll on with a little plastic roller the moss onto it so it adheres to the base. Using Liquitex Matte Varnish, we'll use this to seal in all the dust and the moss and everything else in the base. It has actually a very nice gloss shine for some reason. Now we're going to use some Nurgles rot. We're going to use this as a mask for any mistakes, imperfections, or issues on the bases. Perhaps some of the super glue shines through, or maybe some paint was washed away and the primer shows through, or the matte varnish pulled too much in one spot and you can kind of see it's weird over there. You're going to take the Nurgles rot and you're going to apply it liberally over all these places that just look bad as a mask to help. It's an easy way of just painting in a simple fashion that's relaxing, it's simple, make it up as you go, instead of being a perfectionist and worrying over every little detail. We'll now use AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, and we're going to spray it all over the model. This will get rid of all the shine. Now using some super glue, we're going to permanently attach these plastic rods to the bases. Going back to Bestigor flesh, we then go and then we paint the tops of each and every single boil to add a light color onto it. Now getting Liquitex gloss varnish, I then go over all the boils, the eyes, and everywhere else that looks wet. I then get some Nurgles rot and then apply it on this little bit of poison that's dripping out from the stinger. Well, I pretty much reached the end of this for the drone. The armor, the chittin, is a disappointment. I'm really happy with what I did with the wings, but I just couldn't get the armor right. The body, the skin is pretty good, and its claws are really nice. And the open sores that I was able to paint the purplish brown, they're pretty good. But overall, I'd give this, rating myself, probably a 7 out of 10. Now at the end of the project, the other two drones have different armor, but that's simply because I painted them just like the claws, instead of how I did with the first one. And they look a little bit better, but they still look pretty messy. I painted the plague bearers on top just like I did with my other plague bearers that I did in a separate video, so I saw no point to record it here. And that's pretty much it, everyone. Like, comment, and subscribe if you like the video. Upcoming next is a Lord of Plagues.